Not only has Shervin been a longtime friend, but I would argue one of the most prescient, insightful entrepreneurs and tech investors of our generation, with early entry into companies such as Uber, Airbnb, Slack, Hyperloop, and a truly passionate, active leader on driving the internet as a force for democracy and freedom. As Melissa mentioned, in addition to public hangings, torture, rape, Iran is using the internet as a weapon of suppression. Iran is also not alone. Just last year, over 34 countries suppressed the internet in blackouts with VPN, even landlines, over 182 times. Shervin, you have been involved in many of these different conflicts and protests over more than a decade, from Libya to Tripoli to Ukraine to now Iran. Can you share with us some of these stories?
Absolutely, Natalia. Mahsa Amini's picture should be up here. She's a 22-year-old Iranian woman full of hope and a life ahead of her. And she was murdered by the Iranian terrorist regime in September. And what we've seen in the news is that young Iranian women have courageously stood up to the regime. They've sacrificed their lives. There are now 15,000 young people in prison, and they've begun the execution of these children in the last weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. This is a terrorist regime. It's a regime that should not be accepted in any way, including diplomatically by America or EU. The JCPOA should be totally canceled. We can't be negotiating with a terrorist regime when they're killing these children. It's unethical, immoral, and it's something that the West should not stand for. In terms of what you were talking about, this is something that's been very near and dear to me. I was a refugee. I was born in Iran, and we had to escape the revolution and the Iran-Iraq War. I had bombs falling on us in Tehran, something that's unforgettable as a child. And if I had not escaped, I would have been one of the child soldiers that the terrorist regime sacrificed in the Iran-Iraq War. There were 1 million young people killed by the regime by making them and forcing them to go to war. They had children walking over landmines to clear the way for the military. So this evil has been around for a long time, and that's why I care. And the connection between tech and technology and freedom and democracy movement is something that I care a lot about. And so around 2009-10, in the Green Revolution and in the Arab Spring, I started to meet with the State Department. I was very honored to have been appointed by President Obama to the Fulbright Board. And so I had the chance to speak to Secretary Clinton over dinner with Jack Dorsey and a number of other great tech executives and leaders and visionaries. And it was at that dinner that I said the last bastion of dictatorship is the router. That is the last refuge for these dictatorships. What they'll do is they'll block the internet. And when they're not blocking the internet, they'll filter information. And so to me, the solution was, let's use satellite technology. Let's get backpack routers to the protesters so that they can be connected via space to the world. And she loved the idea, and they put about $50 million in funding for those ideas. So I'm very thankful to Secretary Clinton for having the vision and then acting on it based on a dinner conversation. Don't we wish we had leaders like that? So I think what happened was you had Libya going against Gaddafi. You had the young Egyptians going to Tahrir Square protesting against Mubarak. So I actually flew to Egypt. I went to Tahrir Square. I met with the young leaders of the protests and the revolution there. What did Mubarak do? Mubarak blocked the internet, exactly as predicted. Then I flew to Libya in the middle of the bombing of Sirte. 2 weeks before Gaddafi was killed by his own people, and met with the leaders of the revolution there and soldiers in Benghazi. Went to Tripoli 30 days after it was liberated and met with them. And then the eastern part of Libya, Gaddafi, as predicted, had also blocked the internet and cellular communications. So there was an effort to bring cellular, the same idea of connecting the router. And this led to this idea that I called open mesh. And open mesh was this idea of using these technologies. So what you see here to my left, your right, is the Starlink terminal. To me, when I look at this, it represents freedom. There's been groups now smuggling these Starlinks into Iran, and I'm happy to announce that the first Starlinks are active in Iran, and the Iranian government cannot block it. Thanks to Elon, he sped up the orders for these Starlinks because it was backlogged. There's so much demand for this. But you put this anywhere and you're connected, whether you're in the mountains or in a desert, you're connected to the internet. And to me, it is a tool to spread freedom and democracy in the world. This is something that dictators cannot block. And it's something that represents a watershed moment, I think, in our history, that people can communicate with the world via space and not be blocked. And this will be part of the kind of immune system that we need to build. We need to build antibodies against dictatorship, such as in Iran. Thank you.
From your activism, your engagement there on the ground, I want to laser in a little bit on the protests. Are these still protests, or has this become a revolution?
That's a really great question. I've thought about this quite a bit, and many of my other friends in this space, and I agree. Karim Sajapur, who unfortunately couldn't make it, is one of the leading experts on Iran and works with I have tremendous respect for him. Him and I both agree that this is actually a revolution. This is a revolution. It's a women-led revolution. And these are teenagers. It's the granddaughters that are protesting against their grandfathers that are trying to control their lives. And they are bravely taking off the rusari, the chadors, the covers on their heads. They're cutting their hair symbolically. And it is a revolution, and what we have to remember is revolutions don't always happen overnight. This has been 43 years in the making, and it took a young generation, it took these teens to have the courage to go against the Islamic Republic. And so if you look at 1979, it took 18 months for that revolution to happen. It might take 18 months, 24 months, 36 months, whatever it has already begun. And a Gordian knot is now constricting the Islamic Republic. I just urge our leaders in Europe and around the world and in America to not engage with a terrorist republic, to recall their ambassadors, and only engage with the young people of Iran and give them tools like this to seek their freedom.
Speaking of Karim Sajapur, your friend and really a leading Iran expert in the world from Carnegie Endowment, he wrote an really effective New York Times opinion piece that you and I both love, talking about the power of Iranian culture and the power of Iranian culture to overtake the military. And I want to quote it exactly as he stated: 4 decades of the Islamic Republic's hard power will ultimately be defeated by 2 millennia of Iranian cultural power. Can you talk a little bit about that cultural power, and also the legacy of strong women pre-1979 in Iran?
Absolutely. I think people around the world are just becoming conscious of the courage of Iranian women. And it's been something that has been in our culture for 2,500 years. We had women generals in the empire, the Persian Empire, women generals that led battles and troops, thousands of troops, and they were heroes to the nation. We had women queens who led those women generals. It's something that's in our culture. And Iran has been this bridge in Central Asia between worlds, and it's been conquered many times. But every time the Iranian people and its culture conquered the conquerors, the Greeks became Persian. The Arabs became Persianized. The Mongols from Genghis Khan became Persianized. And so that has been the trend. And it's only been 43 years with this terrorist regime there, and you're beginning to see that effect. The soft power is going against the hard power. And if the world stands up with them, then they can be defeated.
I want to, clap, yes. I want to zoom out one more time and ask again a higher level question around the internet. The Atlantic Council came out with its preeminent report looking over the next 10 years and interviewing America's greatest foreign policy thinkers. The survey was around whether the internet and social media actually does drive democracy or whether it drives authoritarianism. And 55% felt that social media actually has a very negative effect on democracy. And I raise that especially in light of the fact that it's such a far-flung extreme from what we felt around the Arab Spring, around 2009, 2008, around the power of social media. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you agree with that assessment?
I think that any technology can be used for good or evil. And the irony of that is that what we've seen is kind of dictatorships like in Russia can use social media to affect elections abroad. So these technologies can be used in reverse by the dictators to weaken our democracies and cause all kinds of havoc and mayhem. And we've seen this in America, unfortunately, and we've seen it in our elections. And we have cold hard facts and evidence that the Russian state and intelligence organizations use their own hackers to do a lot of this kind of social media hacking and infiltration. And so while it can be used for good, we can also fight back with technologies like Starlink. I think it takes a little bit of more kind of 360 leadership from places like Facebook and so on to realize how their tools are being manipulated and to shut it down faster.
I have so many more questions for you, Shervin, but time is flying, and I would be bereft to let you off this stage without talking a little bit about markets, tech, the VC space, and the road ahead. You were super prescient on this already in 2018, perpetrating your own Twitter storm around overvaluations and inflationary concerns. Tell us a little bit about how you feel about 2023, and also what were the markers that were the red flags for you already in 2018?
That's a great question. I mean, 2018 to 2021 is an era that I view as a drunken era. The discipline, the discipline of investors was lost, and we had valuations really there was no model that supported the valuations that were being given by, especially the private equity firms that were coming into earlier and earlier stages and really corrupting and polluting the natural system of how venture capital should work. And part of what I mean is if you start giving massive valuations and secondaries and so on, you essentially corrupt the system. And this is what happened. We had basically cheap, if not free capital, flooding the world. And you had hundreds of new funds being created by people that might not have had the actual experience and discipline and training to build models and support these types of valuations. So I think 23 going forward is a sobering time in many ways, and it will we will come out of it. I think we will be in a recession in the US sometime this year. Inflation is starting to, very slowly come down. So the signals for me are 23 is probably a lost year in terms of if you're expecting your investments to really, come back. That's not going to happen, unfortunately. And there's going to be a lot of layoffs. So there's going to be a lot of pain, and that will reflect in the elections in 24 as well. And so you will have this period of time where we are essentially licking the wounds of the last 5 years of drunken behavior. And then I think what'll happen is, at least for me, I try to invest when it's still an idea. And the valuations of those companies have now come back to earth. And it's much more reasonable valuations. And so the ecosystem will be a little healthier, and we'll start seeing and percolating founders that have the resilience of starting companies in a downturn. Is usually when we find these incredible founders and incredible founding teams who, against all odds, created companies when everyone else was running for the exit door.
If we continue with that and basically suggest, at best, if the VC model is not broken, it needs to be redefined. You are building something new at Edison that is more of a movement and not just a fund. Can you give us a little sneak peek into that?
I'll just do a quick 30 seconds. Edison Fund is a movement. We're basically going to the earliest stages, finding founders and backing them when it's just an idea. And we did this with actually an Iranian woman in London and Cambridge who is a pharmacist, and so she's building the pill pack of the UK. It's called Pill Sorted. Her name is Samira, and in 1 year from when it was an idea and I gave her funding, she hit £1 million in sales just in Cambridge, and just got funded by Silicon Valley VCs, and she's going to take over the UK. So more of that.
Yes. You have a good nose, you're driving tech diplomacy, and you're recently a grandfather. Congratulations, Shervin. Thank you.
Thank you.